Welcome back to From Pain to Gain. Today we are talking escaping financial pits. I have my brother here, Fred Williams, and I'll just jump into an introduction for him. Fred Williams is a leader in both the corporate sector and in ministry. He's the founder and CEO of two nonprofit organizations, Elite Freedom and CrossFit Lifestyle. Fred's organization has helped provide non-perishable food to over 10,000 people in less than 4 years in multiple states. And on a more personal note, Fred lost 142 pounds. That's a lot in less than 14 months without any cuts, knives, surgery, drugs, or diet plan. And on a more personal side, he's also been married for 20 years, which is also fantastically commendable, and overcame many financial issues throughout his life, including while being single, to married, to having a family with 3 children. Welcome in, Fred.
Thanks, Ivan. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here with you and the channel.
Awesome, bro. It was great meeting you in Israel. That trip, we had a group tour a few weeks ago. That was a special time. We'll have to make a separate episode on that in the future, right, Fred?
Definitely.
Yeah. So, financial issues. This is something that even while making a lot of money is easy to jump into, right? I myself have, even making massive amounts of money in corporate America, still struggled with debts and spending money on the right things. And I even knew a very close friend of mine that made over 100 grand a year that still, with one daughter, struggled to pay the bills. This guy was doing the extreme stuff. He came to do like cutting his own hair and having only like 3 sets of clothes. And I was like, wow, if you're having trouble, I don't know what I'm going to be doing when I have children with my wife. But that was years ago. So in case you're new to the show, by the way, before we start jumping into the different segments, let me explain to you kind of how we are going to go through this. It's the segment of a timeline for working through any issue, particularly financial. And Fred will be sharing his experience, as will I, throughout the meeting. Number 1 is complacency. So being okay with what you're going through. You might not even know better. Atrophy. So just letting that sit in your life, and guilt, kind of more turning point of, yeah, I don't like living this way. And then the escape, the actual plan of action out of whatever is going through your life, in this case, financial issues. So complacency. I kind of touched on, the issues I had when I was in corporate America, Fred, and kind of habits. I'll talk to more of my habits later, but could you speak to your side of the story too?
Sure, man. Oh man, work as a young man, working prior to marriage and working a job and nearly making somewhere around $60,000. Poor habits and complacency definitely led to me down a road of destruction because I had no knowledge and no awareness of what I was doing with what I was making, based on poor decisions. Even at one point, as I shared, is actually went through a repossession of a car because of complacency. So
And then also we kind of touched on before we started recording that you didn't quite know a way out because you just didn't have the right circle around you, right?
Yeah. So as a young man growing up in a single family home, very limited resources, and then even for my mom, not having a good solid financial understanding or the ability to transfer knowledge to her children. That was very hard, not having resources there to sort of like train and develop like what are best practice outside of working hard. Put your money in 401k and just do the best you can on the job, and you'll make it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We have these kind of other kind of, I guess, American dream type things that also we are maybe ignorant to, I think, that is not necessarily the right way to go about things. Like for me, finding out that corporations actually don't much, like especially larger corporations, they don't care much about you as a person and you growing. You could be working, for 20 years for a corporation, and if they just want to lay off executives, if you worked your way up to that level, that's just what's going to happen with your life. And you may not have anything else. You may have been making $400,000-$500,000 a year, like I've heard friends of mine actually doing, and once they get let go, they don't have any other money source and no job leads because they're way up that corporate ladder. It was not exactly they were protecting what happens if this doesn't work out. They were just kind of following the American dream of, I got a nice house and nice car and nice school and stuff like this, but never actually stopping to think about, oh, backup plan. I need to have assets. I need to make things work for me, as opposed to keep on working for this money, indefinitely. And higher you work up corporate ladder too, I would argue you actually lose more family time, working more, or more risk of working 50, 60-hour weeks plus. Any thoughts on that, on the complacency side? Fred?
Wow, man. I mean, I can have a long answer for that, but in short, it's one of those things, man. Life brings us experiences, but working hard for someone else's dreams, so much so that we lose grip in reality of our own personal dreams, and then we just get complacent with just going after the American dream, or the dream that seemingly fits with our society. As I got the nice house, I got the nice wife, we got the kids, we got the pool, or we can travel and explore a little bit differently than years now being an entrepreneur, not realizing that corporate America, someone was an entrepreneur and we just happen to be working for the entrepreneur and making their business good, without having the knowledge on how to do the same thing and apply those same work ethics for us. So we end up losing that quality time. I can't tell you how many years I may have lost with my children and my wife over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big deal.
Yeah. And there's, I'm sure there are gratifying corporate positions, just to kind of not make everybody feel bad, the maybe actually protected, right? Like it may be a job, maybe in the tech world, where you're programming, where other companies may be hiring for that. Maybe programming gives you a lot of gratification. But essentially, not having a backup plan, not having investments, not having the right circle of, like, I guess, financial literacy is kind of setting you up for failure, because I don't know about you, but I just thought about this phrase, serial fillers. Yeah, I could easily call myself a serial filler in most of my life, where, like, for example, when I got that first credit card with a $10,000 balance, I was like, ooh, time to fill this thing. And that is not exactly the best decision to do. But I think particularly with somebody like me, where there's this rap lyric that comes up, which is spending dough like I never had. You finish that profane word. That really, when you're growing up with childhood traumas, you got to be careful about that sort of thing. Like, when you get access to serious cash, spending it everywhere, even though it's actually not doing much for you. Like, I've got on many Amazon binges. I don't know about you, Fred, but it's a dangerous thing.
I don't do the Amazon binges, but I have enjoyed other ways of spending money. Again, I can't tell you exactly where I spent it all. I just can tell you how I enjoyed certain things or aspects of life back then.
Yeah.
Not so much as now. And
yeah, I think a phrase you actually used, which was pretty heavy hitting for me before, was I was making 60 grand a year, but I didn't know where it was going. And that was I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that statement.
Yeah, and didn't know where it was going. And as we sit here and often have to reflect on past practices, whether they were good, like we said about corporate America. It's wonderful. I mean, I'm in corporate America as far as a full-time job right now, and I enjoy it. But when you talk about the money that you make and the things that we're doing, is not growing up in a poor household, coming out to make $60,000 in my early 20s. I just wanted to live life and enjoy the way that I felt like I should. And there was no documenting process, right? Like it was
Mhm.
just like it's my money. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm gonna spend it where I want to spend it, and who cares? And then when I got married, I was mindful that I just can't spend money my way, as the songwriter said it, do it my way. But we
Mhm.
did it together. However, those practices made it a little bit rough in the beginning. So it made our dreams delayed a lot longer because I had to clean up past practices or behaviors, the good and the bad.
Yeah, makes me think of that corny accident attorney line on TV. It says, "It's my money. I want it now,"
Yeah.
which is, I guess, kind of a American belief, right? Like it's all about me.
Hmm.
But as more as you, I guess, grow up more into adulthood, you start to see more long term about stuff, or when you want to decide to actually think about the long term, like, well, how is my decision today going to affect my, in your case, three children, 20 years down the line? So I'm glad that you kind of made that decision throughout your family, your marriage, to kind of work through that. Um, what sort of atrophy did you go through, would you say, like, in living that sort of way, Fred?
um at some point had to deal with the some level of guilt, and thinking about guilt is also had to grieve a part of the process of losing a lifestyle in order to gain another one, if that makes sense. Most of us associate a level of grief with a loved one, but it's the absence of something that we've been accustomed to, something being stripped away from us. So I had a repossession, and then during marriage, after we got married, during still struggling to try to overcome some of those challenges and battles financially, we began doing pretty good, but we had to stop. Like we had to pause when the housing industry crashed back in '07, '05. No, '07. '07. I had to remember the date. So back in 2007, that really affected our house. And we had to live through because of past practices. We didn't have as much saved. We wasn't as far ahead as we wanted to be. And I had to actually file bankruptcy. So the atrophy of that is a lot of unwarranted things came our way, and we still figured out a way to still have some joy in that. But hopefully that answers the question that you're asking me. But
Oh
that's
yeah, I guess to kind of timeline it out, the uh I guess not progressing enough and kind of sitting in that not progressing enough, the atrophy of not using those financial muscles caused these added consequences.
Mhm.
So that makes sense. Um, for me, I could relate to it I'm trying to think of a more recent way in terms of atrophy. The Even after leaving my job in 2017, there were still kind of remnant issues of not dealing with things financially, but there was also new identity issues, which is I'm no longer being paid hourly, biweekly. I'm only being paid by the effort I put in, which could be great, but it could also not be great at times. But one of the consequences of that is at a certain point, I realized, oh, I'm making, $70,000 for my rental properties, but mortgages, debts is eating up 50,000 of that.
Mhm.
And so while I have this pie in the sky number of, oh wow, look at how great I'm doing. I replaced my corporate income. I'm not doing anything for the most part. I'm laying down on my couch. But I got this drastic 80% just chomping out, right? So I didn't really handle my financial literacy and really understanding what my debts were doing to my actual like quality of life. Even if I did have a large chunk of change that got me through certain months, I still had to keep in mind, hey, this is gonna run out. Like I got to do something about this debt that's just keeps on chomping out at the bit. Um, so that's kind of my atrophy and having to go into the guilt section, like you mentioned. Kind of the turning point for me was I don't want to keep you know waking up thinking, oh, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, I don't know if my reserve will be able to accommodate me and my family, and I can't keep living like this. So I got to, really take care of these debts in a systematized way, so I'm not living in fear or living in, oh, do I have to take on another set of sales, or do I have to hire X amount of people to offset this upcoming fear of mine? Like, how about I just get rid of this gigantic debt that's eating up my monthly income as fast as possible? So that's one of my guilt points. And there were actually scary points throughout the last, what would that be, 5 years, to where I was concerned about my household. And I had to take drastic steps to reach that, which was uncomfortable, painful for me and my wife. But ultimately it had to be done, and we got gain out of it and much more understanding out of it. Another great thing was I'm more comfortable talking to her about financial issues now too, as opposed to curling up like, I'll deal with this, you stay over there.
Yeah.
What other aspects on the guilt side or turning point side did you have there, Fred?
Well, yeah, financial problems does bring a strain and a strain on the relationship. Both because we all deal with things differently as individuals, and trying to, be a husband and a companion, and you're dealing with certain things. I know before we got started, we talked about even like with the expectations of us as men, and wanting to be there for our wives and our family. And this financial part is really big, because when you, in addition to what you were saying earlier, I thought about the educational piece, educational bills, and not looking forward far enough into the future to figure out how things are going to plan out. I mean, even some of the most successful people, even doctors, still have a lifelong or a long time period before they're able to pay off student debts, especially here in the United States. Paying off student loans, that was something, a turning point. And then what's coming in versus the output, and how long will it take to the point where your output is less than what you're bringing in, to be able to really live on the sofa and be like, money can feel like it's being made 24/7, or you position yourself to be able to make money 24/7, depending on what your goals are. For like me, like even with the Elite Freedom, the non-for-profit that we have here locally, one of our goals is not to make a lot, is not to make money, it's a non-for-profit, but is to bless people and to make sure that they have what they need. And so for my family, that outcome is also doing the same thing, being able to provide that coming, I think you said over the hump, or overcoming that hurdle. Yeah, that's one.
Yeah. I will say this too, that maybe you can relate to this, Fred, in your experience. It's easy as men to, for example, I think fall into I just didn't tell my wife because I don't want to worry her. And I've been guilty of that myself, of like, uh, this is coming to a head, but I'll just worry her if I share what's going on. Whereas actually it's valuable for them to know, to see, maybe they could offset some of the risk coming up soon.
Mm-hmm.
Another great thing that comes to mind is being able to just accept the reality that your money is kind of where your heart is. I would say pretty much like 75% of the time.
Yes.
So being able to share that with a loved one, or forget even, maybe you're single, being able to share that with an advisor, investment advisor, or whatever, being able to have real conversations about where you're at is a pretty strong position to be, versus I'm going to do me and I'm going to spend it my way.
Mm-hmm.
And spend your way right into the ground. Any thoughts on that, Fred?
I'll give a short answer, and if I may, I mean, there is a verse that immediately came to mind. With that, it just says, where your treasure is where our heart lies also, in Matthews. And it talks about that. And this is something that my wife and I had to really check and balance ourselves: is where is our money going, and does it represent our heart? Because if where our money's going doesn't represent our heart with where it is today, where our heart was years ago may be a little different, but does it reflect where our heart is today? And if it doesn't, then we need to rethink what we're doing with our finances. Aside from the fact of the things where electric has to be paid every month, water, we don't get to choose those places unless we change our residency. But those are things that come along with the territory for whenever we live. Unless we pay off our mortgage, then we don't have to deal with Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citizens, and all these other financial institutions. But I would agree, is where our heart is. That's where our treasure is. That's a representation of where our heart is. So, and then that even comes back with investing into our families. For with having 3 children, we often reflect on where we are spending and how we're spending on our children, and not to put it necessarily in their pockets, but make life to what it needs to be and not over strenuous. And that's, like we talked about before, that can be a whole nother topic or discussion from where they are versus where we are, because in which position our hearts to be in a lot better place.
Amen, bro. You shared also kind of your journey before the recording, and that by itself was pretty powerful. You were actually in pretty low credit range, and now you're in the high rung. Plus, I think you said it was 4 properties y'all have owned. So I also wanted to bring you in because of just that experience alone. Like, not a lot of people could say they've had that journey, particularly in marriage or even by themselves.
Sure. You want me to expand upon it?
Oh, sure, you can. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we I would say in that light that you just shared, we've been blessed to be able to sign the mortgage papers for 4 different homes. I promise you, the first one was out of pure necessity of a bad situation. But after that, we mortgaged the first one. We moved to the second one, was able to temporary rent the first one, but things didn't work out. And then we just decided not to do the rent. But that came through some struggles and some strife. And then the other component with, credit score. Now, to say we mortgaged the house when we first got married, would have never been able to do it. My credit score, my personal credit score, which is not my wife's, was in the high 400s or right around 500. And today, my wife and I, we sit not boastfully, but humbly at about 800. And that's through a lot of work. From that complacency, the pain that created, the astrophy, and now bridging to a point of, I think we're going to get to how we escaped, coming out of those situations.
Before we jump in there, I want to jump back to something here, because you made me think of something when you said the representation of where your heart is where your money is being spent. But to speak to kind of your first or second property, there's also something that the heart reveals if we decide to kind of really dig deep into the Bible and kind of get advice on it, is where your heart is about losing money. And you mentioned a powerful experience about how basically a fellow Christian took advantage of you and decided just not to pay you rent to cover, the bills and, whatever, maybe increase your net profit. And so that was not comfortable. But I would say there's another verse that one could kind of have a deeper look into, which is anybody that doesn't take care of the household is worse than a non-believer, which is on face value hard to take in. It has been hard for me, but
Woo, that's heavy.
Yeah. But if you think about it, like, you don't have to take responsibility for that guy. Like, they're taking advantage of you. You're losing money for them. It's okay to, evict them. And I think it's hard for Christians to be able to take that in, because we take the sacrifice, the picking up the cross so seriously, which is commendable. But then there's the aspect of like, hey, we got to let them pick up their cross too, right? And kind of letting people slide and forgiving them indefinitely is also kind of hindering them from honoring themselves, honoring who they are as God's children. And so it was hard for me to kind of even look into that for myself. And kind of, I always would let my tenants slide on a lot of things, which is why I decided anything that has a conflict of interest, stay away from the actual business, the meat of the business, like friends, family. They cannot rent from me because I would just, pour over my heart for them.
Yeah, your heart may be revealed, and their heart could be revealed, right? Because you have some folks that's going to do the right thing because their personal convictions and where their heart really is, they're going to do the right thing.
Mhm.
And for example, like where you said some of the reasons why, but you also are mindful to guard yourself, not to expose you and or another other individual to have to position themselves to be that way. And the gentleman the family that rented from us happened to be a coworker and a friend, and they named the name of Christ and proclaimed being a believer, but naturally, in the sense, they just did not have it well together with the finances in honoring the commitment. It's one thing to fall inside, have a financial deficit and you run into a situation. It's a different thing just not to simply blatantly honor your commitments.
Yeah.
And that didn't necessarily, it revealed a couple of things to me, but it also let me see, okay, how far am I willing to go before letting the person, like you just said, be accountable for the things that they're responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Bro.
that was a challenge though, but that was
Yeah.
challenge. It was tough. I had to be peaceful. I had to be mild. I had to have temperance.
You got all the spiritual gifts in one swoop.
You had to exemplify all of the fruit, man. And I'm telling you, behind closed doors, when it was just me, I could, but even for years after that, me and that individual remained in we had a good relationship and brotherhood for a extended period of time, because that also opens up an opportunity for a level of forgiveness, not forgetfulness in one aspect, of course, because I can bring it up now, but forgiveness is that I hold nothing against those individuals at all.
Amen, bro. I just got to ask though, since you worked with this guy like literally day to day, did you want to like power slam him?
Oh,
WWE?
Listen, yes, I wanted to bless him in a whole non-sanctuary experience, if you know what I mean. It was definitely it was a not to be so cliche, but it was definitely a trying of my character. And yeah, so I love the WWF,
Okay. Yeah, the original.
I know a few moves that I could have, imposed them, but the better part of me, the God part of me, it was a little better. It made me be better. So
Amen, bro. That's good. For those of us that may not know what the fruits of the spirit are, they're love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So let's go ahead and jump into the escape portion. Fred, what was your kind of escape route look like?
Well, the escape route definitely consisted of us exposing ourselves to knowledgeable people, surrounding ourselves with the people that had experience as well as education, and have had like some negative things happen to them. So the most part was submitting ourselves to be teachable and to walk through the journey and to just do things differently than we had done before. And it meant really cutting back on some stuff. So we had to make some major changes initially.
What was kind of the specifics of what you had to cut back, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, specifically, first thing was what's essential and what's not. Whatever wasn't essential, and if it wasn't in the budget, it had to be cut. Cable was not essential, had to be cut. Eating out was not essential, had to be cut. Driving, we went as far as if we left our house, Ivan, we had to do multiple things in one circle so we didn't waste gas. We was very restricted on how far we went, where we went. And quick story is, during this time, my wife really enjoyed, this is before, online baking and all the other stuff. Surprise, I can't be that old. But It was, before online banking was really, as much as how it is today, you couldn't pay. So she like driving around to the stores.
Hmm.
And at that time, the only option was drive to the store and put it in the mail.
Right.
Well, a stamp was much cheaper than gas. So we would buy the stamps and make sure that we would mail them off rather than drive to the store to burn extra gas. Because it was 20 years ago, to burn extra gas just to go do simple things. And another part was very humbling is we even, and because I'm hopeful that someone that will hear this will be able to pick up on a few pieces. We submitted ourselves and open to knowledge as we got to a point where we couldn't sustain ourselves financially. So we had to, one, I had to make a choice. Who was going to work? Is it me and my wife going to work, or me or my wife's going to work? Because childcare was more than what my wife would be able to bring home. And since she was working, the government, we would be taxed. So we decided that she would not work. And then with her not working and being home with the kids, she was able to be the mom at home, stay at home mom, but it also positioned us to be able to use funds that were available through the government. Felt like I was a working citizen. I was contributing.
Hmm.
I was putting in, and this would be my way to be able to be a recipient of some of the things that had been invested for years, which was we had to apply for WIC and we had to give government assistance for a couple of years until we were able to correct our behaviors and be on the flip side of needing so much help and now being able to provide for ourselves and become self-sustaining.
That's awesome, bro. So it sounds like first and foremost, y'all wrote down a plan.
Yes.
So that's, I think, number one for anybody. I remember in kind of the more darkest periods of my financial life, I literally just brought out a spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet, and I said, "This is what I have today. This is what I have coming in. This is what I have going out for the next 7 days
Mm-hmm.
and next month, and this is, monthly. This is what I got to pay." And just having that kind of sit down, like, hey, this is real. This is not going anywhere, and this is what I have today, even if it's $2. I think that's a pretty powerful position to be.
Mm-hmm.
Just one step at a time. Let's get through this and develop a plan instead of, oh, I'm just going to kind of go in a corner and it'll figure itself out at some point in the future.
Got to face it head on.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, you gotta face it head on if you're gonna come out of it. You gotta
Yeah.
just.
Yeah. Even if it is scary, which is the subject of this channel, right? From pain to gain.
It is painful.
Yeah.
It can be painful.
Yeah. Um, so for me, kind of the turning point, um, I guess before I jump into the actual thing that made the biggest difference for me in terms of my finances coming out of being employed, one of the biggest things I realized, speaking to that spreadsheet, was I realized my Corvette, my 1980 Corvette, was pulling between 10 to 20 grand a year out of my pocket.
Mm.
This bottomless pit of a car
Mm.
that was on 15 tow trucks over the last probably 7 years or something
Wow.
that I owned it was something I was wanting to actively not want to let go of, right?
Mm.
There was emotional, there was toxic reasons why I didn't want to give it up. But once I, hit that spreadsheet, hit reality, I not immediately gave it up. I immediately gave up spending so much money on it. So within 3 years, I did dwindle down how much I was spending on it and actually got myself a good daily driver that didn't cost much. But at some point, I realized, okay, every time at the end of the 3 years, I realized every time I take this thing out the repair shop, there's another issue that comes up. So it's just time to sell this thing, even if that's at a massive loss. I ended up selling it for like 4 grand, I think, which is not anywhere close to what I bought it for, much less what I spent on it. But at some point, there's investments that you just have to cut your losses on, and to be real with yourself and say, hey, I may be holding on to something because, well, for me, my hardened heart,
Mm-hmm.
like for example, one of my parents was saying, you should get rid of that thing. It ain't doing that for you. And I don't know about you, Fred, but when somebody tells me to do something, I'm the exact opposite. I'm gonna be like, hey, let me show you why I'm right, even if it costs me massive amounts of losses. And but nevertheless, I got what I got out of it, and I was done with it. And I've moved on to much more longer term viable cars. Now,
Okay.
going past the kind of budget kind of spreadsheet thing like that car, I would say a big thing that also drastically changed my financial position was me just having the guilt of being in a job I didn't really care about and spending money and action to get out of it. So I know in my heart I'm a very extroverted guy hanging out with people, which is naturally conducive to real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And within about a year of, luckily, my investments were able to let me leave my job. But about after a year, I realized that even stronger position in real estate was being able to do affordable housing and focusing on that. And so I would say once you live and work in a field that you truly love, even if it's just a journey to that loving that thing, you could make exorbitant amounts of cash. Because think about it. Are you going to be working like a passionate maniac and putting out great products, great content for something you're not really crazy about, or something that you can't wait to get out of bed to do content for and stuff like that, products for? Of course, you're going to do greater things in your true talents. So that's my main advice there. I know I just had something, but of course it left me also. Come back to me idea. Fred, do you have any thoughts on those points I made?
It happens, that forgetfulness, the forgetter works.
Yeah.
No, definitely got to do something you passionate about. I am now, I commend you for being able to step away, 5 years ago and just go into where you really want to be, and that it's sustainable and it's life-giving at the same time. That's the part where, resonates with me, is that it's life-giving. I enjoy what I do. Anything I do always involves people. I'm extroverted just like you, Ivan. I think that's how we started talking and interacting.
Yeah.
It's just from a personality standpoint, but I also enjoy what I'm doing. But now I'm moving to something that's really allows me to express my passion and to see the amount of people, if I may segue to just one part of this, to see the amount of people that can be blessed through our passion and it be fruitful in multiple areas of our life. If it brings income to us or gives us that ability to serve, I think that is the greatest part. And being able to, do that in one area of my job now, while on the side, also minister to other individuals, because that's not something, a part of me is not something where it's going to bring me a lot of financial gain, but is going to give someone else that stability that they need to be a little bit more financially well off, because it's one less thing they sort of have to worry about. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense, bro. I would say also there was a event I went to a couple months ago, and it was a speaking training, and he was mentioning a statistic that came up for Zig Ziglar, this sales guru guy, and he was being, I guess somebody was trying to convince him to make products to really sell, and Zig Ziglar was like, I don't need to make products. I make plenty of money off my speeches, and I change plenty of people from my speeches alone. And nevertheless, he went ahead and did a study with his, I guess, big database. And out of 100 people, just 100 people sample size, only one of them said that they changed his life or their life through their speech, through Zig Ziglar's speech. All 99 said your products, even his limited amount of products, actually changed their life to do great sales things, business things, XYZ.
Wow.
And so that sort of passion, if we learn how to focus it into whatever it may be, maybe it's speeches, products, or services, whatever it may be, that passion alone will drive it and change hearts in massive ways if we decide to let it, versus kind of being passive. and a gun going into the corner. I remember one of the things actually in Israel. This is the point. I just recalled it, by the way. Fred, praise God. So when we were in Israel, one of the many churches we walked into, many historic churches, I remember one explicitly had about 8 pillars. When you walk in, you could just see 8 massive, or no, columns. Columns. And I could see immediately there, you could make this into 2 or 3 levels. You'll probably have between 6 to 12 units. And so many homeless people, low margin income people could be living here instead of and not doing much for Jesus's actual mission, which is helping the needy.
Right.
So if you walk into a place and you could just see things, your vision, you have an augmented reality of what should be there. That may be a sign of where you need to be in your journey, and using your talents well, to benefit your finances too, because you should be paid for your passion too.
Facts.
So any last points, brother, before we wrap up this episode?
No, I don't really have many points. I mean, you know, from paying to gain, we talk about the financial. I would summarize it in the part is be open. Just this channel right here is something that is beneficial, and you know, something that is a great tool for other individuals who may be in a painful situation, needing to grow. And as you take that pain and allow it to turn into gain, and as you weather the process, you know, I'm a believer, and I firmly believe that hold on to God and build your faith and your trust, and literally where your heart is, may your treasure be there too. And if you're, again, like I said earlier, if your treasure doesn't line up with your heart and vice versa, then sit down and roadmap it out, put some things in writing, and don't try to do it alone. Go to someone. You know, there's safety in the multitude of counseling. So in this arena, when we talk about finances, find those that are good with finances and allow it to really work for you. You know, like I told you before here, there's other components, even when it comes down to the CrossFit stuff, that is an fortified intentional transformation. It has to become a part of your lifestyle and not just something that you do for the temporary.
Yeah. Speaking of that, could you speak to your organization, CrossFit, before we wrap up, and any other things you want to mention and how people could reach out to you too?
Sure. So CrossFit Lifestyle is CrossFit being an acronym, not to be confused with CrossFit the workout, but CrossFit is an acronym for Christ's redemption of seeking souls, fortified intentional transformation. It's a lifestyle. Totally believe that Christ died for us. If we seek him, we will find him. In him is all that we need. And we have to just be willing to allow our minds to be transformed, especially when we talk about the finances, but fortified intentional transformation. If you're interested in hearing more information or seeing this, I too have a YouTube channel. It is CrossFit Lifestyle with Frederick Williams. You'll find it. I would ask, you know, do what we do as YouTubers, subscribe and follow if you see things that are applicable for you. And we're also on Facebook as well as Instagram. Elite Freedom is more of a local non-for-profit, but that is a non-for-profit where we've been able to just bless not just individuals, but other organizations, churches, daycares, both in Pennsylvania, Delaware, so forth and so on, all the way down as far as North Carolina and other local regions. We've been able to help several folks. And what helped us get to 10,000 people or somewhere right at that number, it's not exactly quoted, but I know it's more than that, is what happened when COVID happened, is when the shelves of the stores were empty. Man, my wife and I, we got in a van and just loaded it up and just drove out of state to help some kids who were in need through the daycare get fed. So that's CrossFit Lifestyle and Elite Freedom.
Man, what a gift. Thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you.
And we haven't even scratched the surface of all the stuff you've done. So I look forward to having you back and talking to other episodes. You know, the point of this channel is to really hone down every single point of pain so that you could really gain from it. And, you know, if you watching, if there's something that's in your heart that needs to be spoken to, throw it in the comments, and we could get an expert to also speak to it too, or even somebody that's worked through it, which I would argue is also an expert, or even in the midst of the journey is also an expert, because somebody got to the end by being in the middle of it too. So thanks for watching. Catch y'all on the next episode of From Pain to Gain.